along with the first one to our website. We're planning to bring the full 4-part series up to the Hawaii Arts Alliance website for future reference. And again, just a big thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have you with us. And with that, Lisa, I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks, Gay. I apologize. I've got some allergy sniffles for today's session, so forgive me. But I wanted to introduce. We thought it was really an important piece to the series around just straight up answering some questions around how to navigate that square building that is a mystery to many of us. It's very complicated. There's a lot that goes on in the 3.5 months of the annual session. And for newcomers, it can be very daunting. And so we have a very wonderful resource that is actually physically in the state capitol called the Public Access Room on the 4th floor. And it's been just an amazing resource for anybody to drop in and ask any kind of questions. No questions are dumb. And the access room has always just been very, very helpful. So today we were lucky to actually have the head of the public access room, Andy Langhurst. And so just something to reference also about the public access room. It's a nonpartisan office of the Legislative Reference Bureau. It's dedicated to helping residents engage directly in the legislative process. Andy's had over 15 years of experience in libraries and public service, and she's entering her 4th session at the Hawaii State Legislature, and she's really passionate about making civic participation accessible to all. So we're going to yield to Andy and her wisdoms as she walks us through how to navigate the Capitol and the legislative session. Aloha and welcome, Andy.
Thank you. All right, can you see my slides okay? Excellent. Okay. So here's just a bit of an agenda. I know we'll stop midway through, so it could be that questions happen towards the end after speaker joins us. But I'll be talking a little bit about the legislative process, how to make sure you know who your legislator is for where you live or work, searching for bills, hearing notices, looking at the bill status summary page, as well as just generally learning about the public access room. And like Lisa said, we love your questions. There are never any dumb questions or questions we don't want to hear. We'd rather you ask, because that's what we're here for. So the public access room is on the 4th floor of the state capitol. If you haven't been by to see us, we invite you to come in. We're here Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. During session, it's 8 to 4:30. Or I'm sorry, during interim, it's 8 to 4:30. But we keep our doors open because we want to be welcoming. Just as a general overview, like all states, Hawaii has 3 equal branches. We'll be talking about the legislative process, the legislature that makes the laws. And if you hadn't counted recently, we do have 2 chambers. There are 25 state senators serving 4-year terms, and then 51 state representatives serving 2-year terms. And just as a reminder, the legislators, they're serving as their constituents' voice, voting on legislation. They're also serving on committees focused on particular subject matter, and then serving in leadership roles to keep the work of the legislature moving forward. And if you want to find out who represents you from the primary Hawaii State Legislature website, the capitol.hawaii.gov, if you click on legislature from the left side of the blue bar at the top of the screen and drop down, there is a Find Your Legislator tool that you can use. And when you click on that, it gives you the option to type in your address. And it's one of those websites where you type it in and then it tries to guess what you're typing. It tries to anticipate your address so you know you're getting the right one. So if I was to start typing in the address of the Capitol, so 415 South Baratania, if I clicked on that, what it had just below where it was guessing, if I clicked on that, it would give me the state senator. So you can see Senator Rhodes is listed there. If I click on the little caret, the pointing left, that would collapse it. And then underneath it, I would see the House member. And so this is, again, just a way where you can remind yourself who are the legislators for where you live or work by address. But we also want to highlight, and that's what a lot of what this presentation about, is the most important people or participants in the state government process are the general public, people that represent the interests of Hawaii. And PAR can help you with that. So just to start out, the regular session starts the third Wednesday in January. That's written into the state constitution. So for the 2026 session coming up, it'll start on January 21st. This is kind of a picture view, if you like seeing things in pictures, that's showing that the kind of the quarter of the graph on the upper right side is showing little pieces of a pie, and that is supposed to represent the regular session, which is 60 session days, not counting recess days where the legislature still may be having committee meetings, but isn't meeting in the chambers. It also doesn't count holidays or weekends. And so those 60 session days end up lasting from about the middle of January to either the end of April or the beginning of May. And all those little pieces are different deadlines that bills would have to pass to stay alive and make it through the legislative process. And then the bottom right part of the pie is where it goes to the governor's deadline. And then the last about half of the pie is where we're now, the interim, where people are thinking about what do they want to see happen and meeting with legislators to advocate for what kind of bills could be introduced or what kind of topics should be focused on, and also looking for ways to advocate with others that share similar interests. So just like this meeting. And then once we get to the top again, we've got opening day and we start the process all over again. And then this is a view of the legislative calendar. This is the session calendar, a handout that the public access room provides. It's made up of the House calendar of deadlines and then the sessions calendar of deadlines, and we merge them together because every once in a while they're a little different. And then we tried to color code it to make it easier for people to understand what's going on. So the deadlines that are written in purple that you can see on the screenshot are deadlines that applies to bills. If there were blue things, that usually happens later in the process. Those are resolution-related deadlines. And then there are usually a few budget-related deadlines where the state budget or the executive budget has to be finalized before other bills that are allocating or appropriating money can be finalized, because we need to know how much money is there. And the nice thing about this handout is on the back side of it, we try to put in plainer language, but we're still happy to walk people through it if it doesn't make sense, what these deadlines mean. So what is a first triple referral filing deadline, and what is a first lateral deadline for bills? But again, we will have people that call us and ask us what seems like the same question over and over again, and we're happy to take those questions. And so right now is the great time to be talking to legislators about ideas for new bills, well before the start of session, because legislators will be considering what else is on their queue. What else are they thinking about? Do they have any limits in how many bills they can put forward? But also, how do they get those requests to the drafting agencies so that the bills can be drafted before the bill introduction cutoff? That usually happens about a week or so after session. All those bills need to be put into the appropriate language before we can go forward. And so if people were introducing bills after Christmas, for example, it would most likely be too late because there just wouldn't be enough time. So this is the time to be talking to legislators about your ideas. And usually what we do is we recommend that if you have an idea for a bill, you consider starting with your own legislator, the person that represents the area where you live or work. But you could also consider talking to the subject matter committee chair or a member, a legislator who might have introduced similar proposed legislation in the past that might already be familiar with an issue. And the public access room can help do searches, show you how to do searches so you can find if there have been introduced ideas in the past. And what we often tell people on the phone is, you don't want to just call the legislator's office and say, this is a problem, I want you to fix it. Because for one reason, they might fix it in a way that makes it worse because they don't understand where you're coming from. And so thinking about how you want to summarize the problem or the opportunity and share that information before you talk to them can be really valuable. So saying this law would make X, Y, or Z mandatory, or here are some other states that have proposed similar legislation and how they've done it, just to give them something to go off of. And we've made just a sample, what we call a one-pager, leave behind document that you could use if you were meeting online, you could email it to them after, or if you're meeting in person, you could take it and leave it with them. Because if you stop to think how many ideas legislators are getting from so many different directions, giving them something to refer back to after they talk to you to generate or jog their memory of what the discussion was. So thinking about using short and concise sentences and especially bullet points, something they can skim to jog their memory, and be clear and upfront about what you're asking for. You don't want them to have to read between the lines if you're asking for something or hoping for something really specific. And again, this is just a sample. There are going to be QR codes. This one will take you to PAR, a public access room webpage that has this version of the document if you want to look at it more closely, but you can do it in any way. Some people will do it landscape view or half sheet that they can leave behind, or put pictures or graphs or things like that. But this is just supposed to give you some ideas on what types of things you can include, not only on the leave behind sheet, but to prepare yourself as you're talking to legislators. And then once a bill is agreed upon, is going to be introduced, and once it is introduced, it needs to go through all the committees it gets referred to. And at the same time, it'll be having readings in either the House or the Senate, depending on where it is. And the readings are of the entire chamber. So the committees are the small groups of subject matter committees, the readings happening with the big group. And by the end of the process, if it's still alive, both the House and the Senate need to agree on the exact same wording, and that often will happen in the conference process. And then if it makes it through all those steps and all the deadlines, then it can go to the governor where it could be signed or allowed to become into law without signature. Or if it is overridden, the House and the Senate could consider trying to override the veto. Here's another picture view of that process and a QR code if you want to look at this on the Public Access Room website. This is a quick view of how a bill becomes a law. So on the image at the very top, the idea is in purple. The idea gets introduced as a bill either in the House or the Senate. There can be companion bills where the exact same language is introduced in both chambers, but at some point one of those will die and one of them will make it all the way through if it's successful. So there doesn't have to be a companion bill, but it does happen quite often. As it's introduced, or once it's introduced, it gets referred to committees. That happens after the first reading. And then it can go through the committees again with the deadlines that I'll show you again in a minute. And it'll also have a second reading and a third reading. Again, the ones in pink are on the House side, and those third readings need to happen on individual days, separate days. And then if it crosses over, if it makes it all the way through the left side, through the House, it can cross over and go back up to the top of the right side and start through the process through the Senate. And then as it gets to the bottom, the second half of the image, it can go into the conference committee where we've kind of got pink and blue right next to each other. If there's disagreement in the versions, the House version, the House draft, and the Senate draft, they can come together in conference and try to agree on a final conference version, a CD1, a conference draft 1. And if they do have a conference draft 1, the House and the Senate will both need to have one final reading where all the legislators have the chance to vote on it before it would go to the governor. And then again, making sure that they're paying attention to the deadlines as it goes. So this is just a bigger version of what I showed a screenshot of earlier. So we can see this is the 2025 calendar. The 2026 calendar isn't typically done until December. So from last year, opening day was on Wednesday the 15th, the third Wednesday in January. About a week later, was the bill introduction cutoff date where all the bills needed to be introduced so that they could have their first reading. And if they were referred to 3 or more committees, they needed to be into the second committee by either by about the 7th of February. The House bills needed to be filed, so heard by the committee, any amendments made to a new draft with a committee report filed by the 5th for the House bills or by the 6th for the Senate bills, because sometimes they do things slightly differently. And then the 13th and 14th, the first lateral filing deadline. So the filing deadline, again, it needs to be filed with amendments and a committee report on the 13th, so that on the 14th, it can be considered into its last committee. So 13th and 14th is when it gets out of the second committee so that it can get into the last committee. And then that first decking deadline at the end of February is where it can get be queued up for a final vote. It has to get out of its committee by then so that the third reading in the originating chamber can happen the following week in March so that the first crossover can happen. And then it kind of goes through the process again. It crosses over to the other side and keeps going. So as I mentioned, the bill introduction period is usually about a week after session. About 3,000 bills or so are introduced each year, and only about 10% of them make it through the process. So that introduction period is very important so that they can introduce the bills and consider them during that period of time. When the bill has been introduced, it'll look something like this. Maybe it doesn't have the little scrollies at the top, but it'll have, did it start in the House or the Senate? It'll say the legislative year. On the right side of the top, it'll have an HB number for a Senate bill or a SB number for HB number for a House bill, SB number for a Senate bill. This example is one that has made it through many committees. It's made it through both chambers and made a conference draft. So this SB 1035 was introduced as SB 1035. Then it would have gotten an SB 1035 SD1. Then it got an SD2. It crossed over to the House and there was an HD1. And then when it got to conference, there was a CD1. And so then it'll say a bill for an act. It'll have the title related to the general excise tax in this example, and then have the language of the bill. And there's a QR code here if you want to see more information, and I'll share these slides with the QR code so you can look at them at your leisure as well. I will say that, again, when it crosses from one chamber to the other, the SB number, so SB 1035, that stays the same. When we see the SD2, the draft version, that gives us more information about where it is in the process, but it doesn't change the number where it was introduced. That stays constant throughout the process. So if you were searching for bills and you were at the capitol.hawaii.gov, the main legislature webpage, again, with that blue bar at the top of the page, what we usually recommend if you're searching for bills is to click on Laws and Research, the fourth one from the left on the blue bar, and then go to Reports and List, the third option down, and that'll take you to this Reports and List page. Behind the little drop-down menu, it would say Deadline Tracking. And there are 2 purple links there where you can see House bills introduced or Senate bills introduced. So once that starts happening in January, you could look at all 1,500 or so bills and just scan them if you wanted to, or you could do a Control F on your keyboard and search for arts or something like that. But we often tell people to use the subject search as a starting point. So once you get to the Reports and List page, then you have some menu options on the left side, and subject search is the bottom one that's circled at the bottom of the left part of the menu. I'll also point out that above those left side menu options, there's a drop-down box for the year. So it'll default to the current legislative year, but if you wanted to go back and search 2019, you could use that drop-down menu to do so. Once you get into the subject search, you can search by measure title, report title, and description. So this isn't a search of the entirety of the bill. It's not going to search every single word. But if in this case I wanted to search for bills related to public schools, I could type that in. And then this is the results screen. And from here, I mentioned earlier, you can do a Control F search on your keyboard. And if, for example, I wanted to search for things related to public schools and school meals, you can see that once the search box popped up at the top, I typed in meal. So when I did public schools, it brought back 64 records, and those are bills as well as other measures. You can see the first two start DC, that indicates a department communication or report that was due. And once I type in meal, I do the Control F search, it's telling me that meal shows up 4 times. So that really helps limit my search if I don't want to read each of the 64 items. So once I have my bill number, once I've figured out from here what I want to follow, I wanted to make sure everybody knew how to use some of the features on the capital.hawaii.gov website. For example, signing up to receive hearing notices or submitting testimony. So again, from the capital.hawaii.gov website, up at the top of the blue bar this time, the top right, you can log in or register for your account, and it's a very quick process. Once you're logged in, there'll be 5 options there, and you can click on submit testimony, hearing notification, measure tracking. In this case, I'm on the hearing notification box. And so I could type in a measure, a bill that I wanted to track. In this case, on the left side of the screen, I've said I want to receive an email notification if HB 300, the state budget bill, was scheduled for a hearing. You can also subscribe by committee. That can be a lot of emails, but you can do it that way. If you know you want to receive everything that the House Committee on Culture and the Arts receives, you could check the box next to CAA. And if you are making changes, just remember to hit save and exit once you're done making the changes. So once I have signed up for a hearing notice, this is just an example of what the email looks like. It doesn't share a lot of information that might jog your memory as soon as you read the email. So usually when I get it, because I don't remember all the bill numbers that I'm tracking, I'll click on the link there, the .pdf link, and then I'll go look at the agenda that's attached so I can see, okay, what are those bills that are the measures on the notice at the first line of the email, and remind myself, okay, which of these am I interested in? But because most committees ask for you to submit your testimony 24 hours in advance and typically provide 48 hours notice, being able to get the emails makes that really crucial to meeting those deadlines. Going back to that main login screen from the capital.hawaii.gov, your account, you can also create a measure tracking list. And this is where you come up with your own list. They don't have to be all bills on public schools, for example. The first thing I'll highlight is that you need to name your list. And sometimes people forget this spot. And instead of creating a list where just underneath it, I've called it 2025 bills, they'll just start writing the bill numbers, and it doesn't work really as it's supposed to. So create the list, and then on the right side of the screen, you can add a measure, the third step. And you can even put in the bill numbers just with commas separating them. And then as you get, once the measures show up in your list, just below that, it's not telling you the title of the bill, but you can put a note for yourself. For example, if I wanted to make sure and notify my coworker Jessica if I saw something happening with the bill, if there was movement, I can have that note. And then you would hit the generate report. Once your list is created, you come back to this screen whenever you want, daily, weekly, whatever, and click on generate report. And then the list of measures that are important to you are pulled together, so you don't have to look up each bill by itself. And here's where you'll see the measure number, the keywords, the report title, the description, where it currently is on the current status. And if you double click on current status, for example, it'll resort that so that the most recent action is at the top. So for example, in the public access room, if we resort it and it's April, we know that things that still have a January date are most likely dead because they've probably missed about 7 deadlines by then. So being able to sort it by current status, especially if you have a number of items, can be really handy. And I'll also say you can export this to Excel or as a CSV file. If you want to print this for people, just make sure you do it as a landscape file so that you try to get everything to fit on the screen. But then this makes this something that's easy to share if you're trying to keep other people posted. So as it goes through, again, I talked about the first reading. Once the bill is introduced, it goes through the first reading. It's a constitutional requirement that the bills have 3 readings or votes of the entire chamber. And after that first reading, that's when the bill will be referred to committee. And that's really a great time where you can use your voice to ask for a hearing be scheduled. And the person to go through with that is with that request is the chair, because the chair is deciding which bills will get a hearing. Because with 3,000 or 1,500 or so bills in each chamber, it's pretty hard to schedule all of them in such a tight time frame. So going to the person with the power with that request to schedule it for committee hearing, going to the chair of the committee. And if it doesn't get heard by a deadline, that's when it can die in committee. And I already mentioned, I think, that if about 3,000 bills are introduced, or maybe 2,800, on average, only about 10% of them are making it through the process, and most of them are dying in committee. If your bill gets scheduled for a public hearing, you can use your voice again to provide testimony. And a variety of groups or individuals will be providing testimony. We talked about that hearing notice earlier that you can receive, or you can go to the website to view. And on the hearing notice, it'll list who the committee is, when they're meeting, where they're meeting, the list of measures they'll be discussing. And at the bottom of the hearing notice, they'll provide information about providing written testimony. In this section, they may also say, testimony may be limited to 1 or 2 minutes. So it's good to take a look there to see if there's any time limits posted. There's really no rules on what your written testimony sounds like. That's up to you. There's a QR code that goes to our PAR Engagement 101 page where we have more information about submitting testimony, but also, tips on testimony. But things we recommend is that if you're providing written testimony, make sure you include the bill number. Every once in a while, somebody submits the wrong document in a testimony file. And so having the bill number just gives everybody confirmation that you're testifying, you're saying I support or I oppose on the bill number that's being discussed. Making sure you include your name, and especially, are you for or against the bill? And doing that up front. You don't want to make everybody read to the bottom of your testimony to figure out where you're coming from. You can say it again at the bottom, but putting it up front really makes it easier for everybody to be on the same page. And you can provide a personal story or why it's important to your community, but keeping it short, putting your most important points up front really can make the testimony stronger. So back to the capital.hawaii.gov webpage, once you're logged in, another button you can click on is Submit Testimony. You can also get to this page by looking up the bill. But if you know the bill has already been scheduled, you can go in this way as well. So on the left side of the Submit Testimony page, you can put your bill number in. In this case, I searched for SB 16. You can only submit testimony if the hearing has been scheduled already. And so if it hasn't been scheduled, it won't let you move forward to submit your testimony yet. But in this case, it's in green. It's confirming that this bill has been scheduled for January 26th, and it gives me the form to fill out. It'll pre-populate your name from however you registered your account. It's important to note that you want to make sure that name matches how you're going to log into Zoom, because the person managing the Zoom meeting needs to match whoever's in the Zoom meeting to their list of people that said they wanted to submit testimony. So pay attention to that. And then it'll also ask you to say, do you support or oppose, or are you providing comments only? You will also say, are you testifying as an individual citizen or on behalf of an organization? And we recommend that if you are testifying on behalf of an organization, you confirm that with the organization. They may have specific talking points, or make sure that you are authorized to speak on behalf of the organization. And then you can indicate, are you submitting written testimony only, going to be in person with written testimony, or Zoom via written testimony. And as you scroll to the bottom, you can either attach a file or you can type your testimony in, but it will only accept one of those options. Sometimes people like to attach a file, for example, if they've written it in advance and it's already ready to go, or two, if it's on a letterhead that they want to use. And then once you're done, you want to make sure and hit submit. If you hit save, it won't go through to the committee. So you want to make sure you hit submit. And then once you're back on that main submit testimony page, once you're logged into your account, you can see on the left-hand side where it says what you've submitted testimony for, either successfully submitted or not yet submitted, things that are in progress. This is also where if you submitted and said you want to participate via Zoom, you need to log back into this page to get the Zoom details. They will not email you the Zoom details separately. And so where it says view, it would say Zoom requested, and then I think it says something like join meeting or join once the Zoom details are made available. And then if you're providing testimony in person, you could start by saying chair so-and-so, vice chair somebody else, and members of the committee. But remembering to keep it short and simple, briefly introduce yourself, state your position up front, use your most important points up front in case there is a time limit. So you don't spend the whole time introducing yourself and then they tell you, okay, we need to move on. And once the testimony has been heard, they can vote to pass the bill without changes, as is, or pass the bill with changes amended, or to not vote, to defer or hold the bill. And there's that little grim reaper, because that could be a way that many bills die, is through not voting and then it dies in committee. And if the changes have occurred, they could be significant or minor. Two common changes we see, just as a reminder, is an effective date far in the future, and that's called defecting the effective date. Typically, they don't mean for a bill to take effect January 1st, 3000, but it's a good visual indicator that that bill's still being worked on and they want it to go to conference. If that was the case, they would change the date to something far in the future, and then when it gets to conference, put it to something more reasonable. They may also blank out any appropriated funds. And one way you could think about it is they don't know how much money they have available earlier in the process. And so if the amount is important, if it's critical to a program going forward, they can always record the amount in the committee report so that they remember what to put it back to. But it takes out the amount so that at the end of the process, when they're getting FIN and WAM approval, that they can reconfirm we have this amount of money available and we can put it in the bill. But no matter the changes, the bill must conform to its title. So if it's a bill related to school lunches, they couldn't change it to something like a bill related to a ferry system between Oahu and Maui or something like that. So the bill could be a broader title like public schools, where they could have a little bit more leeway, or something like school meals, which would be more narrow and limit how much they could change it. If a bill gets changed, it gets a new draft number, and this is of what it looks like when you're looking up a specific bill. So if you had typed in HB 141 in the search box just above, this is what would come up. And on the right side of the screen, you can see the different versions. We recommend that you click on the PDF because it'll provide line numbers and page numbers. So if you were comparing two documents, you could see where the changes are, or if you were talking to somebody and you wanted to say, this is something that I think should be changed on page 2, line 6. There's a QR code here if you want to see a handout that just kind of goes over what is on the bill status summary screen, all these different pieces of information, because there is so much good information on the website. And then in this version, we can see how the bill numbers have changed in the committee reports. And then when I scroll down on the page, I can see that where the committee report number is, the 749 and the SD2, and start to match up, okay, when were these different things produced and by what committee? And again, if you have questions on that, the public access room is happy to walk you through it. I can also see that if the CPN committee discussed it on the 27th, I can go look at the agenda and I can click on the YouTube link to go watch the meeting if I want to see what did the discussion look like. After it goes through its committee, it needs to go through a second reading. If it goes to another committee, you can use your voice again. You want to make sure that you write your testimony to each committee. You're not going to use the same testimony each time because it could change as it goes along, or the committee is looking at a different aspect of the bill. And then it would go to third reading, and the same thing. You would keep testifying, you'd keep requesting bills be scheduled for hearings. And then it crosses over, as we discussed earlier, the House bills will go to the Senate, and the Senate bills will go to the House. And here's again that graphical view where it crosses from one side to the other. And it'll move even more quickly after first crossover. And so then bills must get through the non-originating chamber by the second crossover deadline. And then if it makes it past second crossover, if it's gotten through the second chamber and multiple drafts exist, that's when conference could happen. And the committee's individual members that were appointed would come together and try to reach agreement on a final version of the bill. There's no guarantee that members would be appointed in conference. It could be in conference, but the members weren't appointed and meetings may not be scheduled. They're public meetings, but there's no testimony accepted at that point. And then the House and the Senate would come up with rules. And if it has a money referral, it would need final approval from the money committee before it gets out of conference, typically. You can still be using your voice during conference by advocating to conferees, the people that are assigned to meet on those small committees, as well as any other legislators you've developed a relationship with. And then again, as I mentioned, if it goes through conference, final reading would happen where both chambers would have the opportunity to vote on a final version of the bill, but it needs to happen by adjournment or sine die. And then you could use your voice to let the governor know your view. If it doesn't succeed, don't give up. You would just get ready for next year's session. I shouldn't say most, many bills take many years to go through the process. So it's not the indicator of a bad bill if it doesn't succeed. It may need to be socialized to get people understanding, why do we even need a bill on this? Or things need to be tweaked as people provide testimony and bring up concerns about, oh, we didn't even think to talk about how we would handle that. And before you know it, it's the third Wednesday in January, and the whole process begins again. But it's a 2-year cycle that follows the elections, and next year, 2026, will be the second year, the even-numbered year, where bills from 2025, from the first year, can start up again in this year that's coming up in 2026, as well as new bills will be introduced. So they'll have many ideas to keep looking at. But the bills from the first year, from 2025, don't have to move in the second year, and legislators may even opt to reintroduce a bill that existed last year rather than start it up. Maybe they want to make some changes or give it new momentum, but if no new action is taken, they will die. And if you're confused at all, we're happy to help. We already discussed, I think Lisa mentioned that we're a nonpartisan office. We have no charge to use our services. We provide internet, places to sit, lots and lots of handouts. You can use our public access room website. We also do workshops like this, which we post recordings to YouTube. And then we try to make postings to social media like Facebook and Instagram about, for example, what deadlines are coming up, just to kind of keep people familiar with what's going on with maybe more bite-sized information. And here's some information about the public access room, our phone number, our email address if you want to call us or email us, our accounts if you want to look us up on the various websites, as well as the website to the public access room. So Lisa, I think I
great.
can hold at this point.
Yes, thank you. Oh, Andy, that was an excellent presentation, and you made it to the 45-minute mark with such wealth of information. I imagine that some who can stay with us after one might have some specific technical questions for you. So for those of you who can stay, please hold your questions till then. We can see here that Speaker Nakamura has joined us. Thank you so much, Speaker of the House, Nadine Nakamura. I'd like to introduce her to all of you who may not be familiar with her. Speaker Nakamura represents House District 15, that's Hanalei, Princeville, Kilauea, Anahola, Kapa'a, and Waialua on Kauai. She's a 32-year resident of Kapa'a, and she's a former managing director for the County of Kauai. She brings extensive experience in public service and community planning. Before joining the legislature, she operated a planning and consulting business for 20 years and served on the Kauai County Council, so she really understands that process as well. She holds degrees in public affairs and urban planning from USC and UH Manoa. And this wasn't in her bio, but I have been very proud of the fact that she is the first female Speaker of the House in the state of Hawaii. That's chicken skin for me. So congratulations to her. So proud of her. But we're so grateful that she's so busy, but able to join in for about 15 minutes with us today to just kind of give us some pro tips from a legislative standpoint on how to navigate the process. You know, Andy was great in helping the citizen advocate understand how to do it. We'd love to hear from Speaker Nakamura on how we would be well received as responsible and ethical and respectful advocates in this process, and to join in partnership with the legislature around policymaking. So without further ado, I'd like to yield to Speaker Nakamura. But a first question, moderator question for you, a very simple one, is can you tell us what role the Speaker of the House plays for those of you who would like to understand that basic question? Thank you. You're muted, Speaker.
Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for the question, and Janice for prepping me, and Andy for that great presentation, the first that I heard. And you did such a great job explaining the process. The role of the speaker is to oversee this body here. The legislature is broken down between the House and the Senate. We have 51 members in the House, 25 members in the Senate. There are 42 Democrats and 9 Republicans, and they make up the House of Representatives. We have over 120 full-time staff, and during session, we add another 170 staff members. We have a budget of about $17 million, and then we oversee the overall state budget of 18 departments and $20 billion operating budget. So it is a real honor to be the first female woman Speaker of the House, and it's been just 1 year into this new position. I was a representative for the last 9 years, majority leader for 2 of those years, and then was asked to be Speaker about a year ago, after the former Speaker lost his primary election by 250 votes. So really every vote counts. And the other close election last year was in Kapolei, where the representative Pyrrhic won by 11 votes. So this is a huge honor to be in this position. The speaker does a lot of things just to make we oversee all of we have a 60-day session from January to the first week of May. So we preside over our meetings, me along with my vice speaker, Linda Chiyama. And then we set up our committee structure, our leadership structure, and make sure things are moving smoothly. And we do a lot of coordination with the Senate, because a lot of times we have to do things together. So that's what I do.
Thank you, Speaker. Can you share a little bit of, you've been at the legislature a while now in different positions, but what have been, in your memory, like best practices around advocates that come in, whether they're individual citizens or they represent organizations, community-based organizations in particular. What kind of advice can you give to our advocates here around how they can show up in playing that role?
Yeah, I really appreciate it when advocates come in and schedule a meeting ahead of time. Um, when they come in prepared to clarify their request, and when they come in with a clear agenda for, explaining what the bill or what the program they want to introduce, what it's going to cost, who they've worked with, and if they have a bill, bringing it in and explaining what process they went to get to this bill, or if they still need guidance, just sort of having alternatives, clarifying kind of what their thoughts are, and then, seeking advice. It's always just good to have advocates who are prepared. And a lot of younger members are digital people. I'm like a paper person, so kind of, you can kind of figure that out. But I like to have something in front of me. Um, uh, and it's really good to do your work ahead of time. And so don't wait until, session opens up the third Wednesday of January. If you have something ready to go now's a good time to meet with legislators when it's not so hectic. And so, we can, uh, you can have one or two, you can meet one-on-one, or you can have, you can ask to have a group of representatives together. We don't have to abide by sunshine law, so we can meet in groups if it's easier for you. And then just sort of listen in on some of the cues or suggestions. I always like to ask if it's a bill that was introduced before, sort of, what why didn't it pass last time? What did the testimony against this say? And how did you address that? So it's really important um, to look at the previous year's testimony, to talk to the people who raised concerns and do that homework in between sessions, so that what you're presenting really addresses concerns raised by the public.
Yeah, you had a question. You mentioned the fact that people can begin meeting with legislators now. And I know you're a Kauai girl, but you are speaker, so I can understand you're here early, or you're here, maybe year round. But can you share a little bit about how other perhaps neighbor island legislators, when they start to land back on Oahu to prepare for the session?
Yeah, they're already here. They're already coming, many of them at least once a week during the week. They
Okay.
come and they set up meetings. They work with every representative has one office manager who's full-time. So it's always easy to set up an appointment. Yeah, a lot of representatives are kind of go back and forth
Right.
throughout the month. And then it gears up as we get closer and closer to session. But during the interim, the representatives are super busy. I mean, I thought I would have a little bit of downtime, but there's, we do site visits to learn more about our, different state agencies, and it's a good chance to get out. Higher education goes to every campus to visit. Water and land, they go to different watersheds, and they were one group. We even went looking at the coral reefs on the Big Island. People go up into the forests to look, to deal with the issues of endangered birds. And people are going to the prisons and the state hospitals, and we're also prepping bills for next session. Never too early to get our bills lined up. And so working on bills, a lot of the bills require stakeholder discussion. So that's what we, I think it's a really good thing to do your homework ahead of time. Talk to the different stakeholders who have different points of view. And this is the time to do the hard work. Once you're in session, it's much harder to do the fixes needed, to have the deep conversations, because things are moving so quickly. And we have so few opportunities to have public hearings. And then, if you don't, usually a bill gets referred to 1, 2, or 3 committees, sometimes even more. And so to get all bills heard by the 2 or 3 committees in the time frame that we have, committee chairs have to make choices. That's why we start off with over 3,000 bills, and this year we sent about 300 to the governor, a little over 300. And so it's always a challenge, but if do your homework, and the good bills will survive. And then, once the House, I think the way Andy described it and depicted it, it has to pass the House and the Senate, and then go to a conference committee many times. So there's just, a lot of collaboration along the way.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know you mentioned sunshine laws, and so for the rest of you, I put in the chat the guide for understanding sunshine law, and really that's why, excuse me, those interim conversations that you can have with public officials is so meaningful, because it's more intimate, and it's a quieter time to build pilina also with your local representative or senator, and everyone's hair is not on fire. And so it's just a time when everyone can just really understand the issues a little clearer. So, Speaker, I know you have just a little more time with us. We'll switch to 2026 session. What do you think are going to be the hot issues that you're going to be noodling on as a body? And there's so many there's a lot of instability around our economy, the federal cuts. Just what are you anticipating will be a source, like several topics of preoccupation for the legislature this year?
Yeah, definitely this federal government shutdown has huge implications. And then once there is a federal budget, hopefully, we will see what the real cuts are going to be over the long run under this federal administration. So that right now we know that although the Medicaid and SNAP benefits will not be impacted until 2026 midterm elections, that there's still a lot of work that we need to do to deal with the requirements now for employment checks every 6 months. And that alone will add bodies and software needs to set up a system to meet these new requirements. And then with the federal budget, we know that food and nutrition is getting hit. People aren't getting paid for the work they're doing on the federal government side. So the food banks are feeling that. Health, SNAP is going to be impacted, and then health benefits. So health and safety are other key areas we're going to be looking really closely at, because although we might be able to backfill some of these programs, at the end of the day, we're going to have to make cuts, because we receive a lot of funds from the federal government, millions and millions of dollars, and we will not have enough state funds to fill this backlog. Luckily, the state of Hawaii, we set aside $50 million that will be given out to nonprofit organizations impacted by federal budget cuts. So that's one pot of funds we set aside. And then we set aside another $200 million to deal with additional federal government cuts that can be allocated to state agencies. And I just came back from a conference in New York City with other speakers around the country, and they do not have these set-asides. They don't have reserves. So every state is going to be feeling the impact of this federal administration. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. We have 2 minutes of your time. Are there any questions from the group of the speaker at this moment?
Yeah, I just want to, oh, go ahead.
Go
I
ahead.
have a question.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Angel.
Aloha. Thanks for your time. Just a quick question in terms of what bills would make it through the first round. What are you looking for, or what would be a clear bill that's not going to go forward? Is there any, other than it being very well researched and it's already made its first pass? What is something you're looking for? What would make it stand out?
Well, I think on many of our members' minds, the cost of living in Hawaii is a huge, huge concern. That's what we're hearing from our constituents all around the state. So bills relating to affordable housing, bills relating to reducing the cost of childcare, bills, relating to transportation, how to reduce transportation costs and deal with, as I said earlier, food and nutrition. The cost of living issues really rise to the top because our, working families, if 60% of our families are Alice families living paycheck to paycheck, that is a big concern.
Yeah, Makanoe asked kind of a similar question, and feel free, Makanoe, to jump in if I'm misrepresenting, but it's in the chat. What categories of written or documentary evidence best support public testimony? Data analysis, legislative history, pre-statehood statutes, influencing current law, written policy recommendations. Will these, Makanoe is giving examples of, does this give added credibility to the testimony?
When I read testimony, that's what I'm looking for, is what kind of data that you have to support your position. So whether it is quantitative data, qualitative data, what tells your story to base your request for funding or request for a new program. What's the problem that you're trying to address?
Thank you so much. We know we're out of time with you. We really appreciate you joining us today, such a treat. So thank you.
And I just want to say, it's really all about relationships. So, even just start off and build good relationships with your chairs, with members. And just remember that a lot of good bills take multiple years to pass. And so the compassionate care bill took decades, actually. Several of the bills that I've worked on, multiple years. But, if it's important, if it's something you truly believe in, don't give up and just try again, address the concerns, make it a better bill.
That's wonderful advice. It's not for the faint-hearted, this process. It requires a lot of patience to see these issues that everyone's passionate about, to see it through. So thanks for those ending comments. And we look forward to seeing you in 2026 at the session, and all the best for the session. Thank you so much. You're welcome to stay if you want to, but I know we've been told you have to run.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna pivot back to Andy. For anyone who has questions of the wealth of information she provided, And we understand those of you who might need to jump, but we are recording this for reference, so you can check later if you have to leave us. But for those of you who are staying, now's a great time to ask questions. And then, Gay, maybe this is a good time to drop in chat some samples from the Arts Alliance of testimony from the Arts Alliance from a past bill as an example, and maybe, you can give us feedback as to, Andy, you can give us feedback as to whether something like that works. And then we also have, speaker she put a lot of emphasis on this desire to meet people in the interim when they're not quite so busy, right? And so Gay is going to put in the chat an example from one of the Arts Alliance's constituents, someone who works at a school who invites the legislator to Hanaha'oli School in particular to do a site visit. And he does a wonderful job of making that invitation. And we thought that might be a nice sample. And of course, we're putting a toolkit together after this series is POW. And we'll include all of those types of samples in the toolkit for everyone to reference. But Gay's going to attach that for now for you to grab if you'd like to. Okay, any questions for Andy? And remember, no question is dumb. This is a very complex process, as you can see by her presentation. So please feel free, no shame.
Lisa, I have one to kick us off.
Yes.
And I hope this is not a silly question. Just as you've mentioned, no question is a bad question. But as I'm learning, Andy, can you tell me more about how the legislature works in terms of the budget year and a non-budget year? What are the differences in that? Is that something that you can share with us?
I can share a little bit. It's such a big process that some things I don't know well. We actually have a recorded budget workshop on our YouTube channel. I imagine we'll probably do one. I don't remember if we do it at the end of March or early April. That kind of goes over how are the departments asked to submit their budget requests, which we end up pulling on after the fact if there are questions. So I don't know if this will answer it or not, but in that presentation, we talk about going to the Department of Budget and Finance. They have a budget page for the executive budget. And even the grant and aid awards that's where sometimes we use it because we can go in and see, what are the codes for the Department of Human Services or Department of Education, where a grant and aid award winner may be given money that will be dispersed by one of these departments. And so in that process, I believe, let's see, I haven't looked at the presentation for a few months. I think probably about now is when the departments are being asked to think about what are they asking the governor for, what's going to go in the governor's package of bills. And then in January, maybe before the legislative session starts or before bill hearings start, the departments will be giving budget presentations to the various committees. So to WAM and Fin for sure. I cannot remember if they would invite, an education committee to watch it, but those can often be good insights about what the budget, what the departments have been thinking about. But the reason I think that page, the Department of Budget and Finance, and if you have questions about how to find it, call us and I'll walk you through it. Are interesting is because there are so many budget requests, right? And what we're seeing in the state budget is only a fraction of what the departments can even come up with, similar to how, any of us are spending money. There's always more ways to spend money. And so, they can give explanations about moving money around or how many FTE full-time equivalents, or are they part-time or temporary? And then the types of money that they're using for it. So is it general funds? Is it bond funds? Is it federal funding? It still doesn't get as easy as being able to say, okay, with federal changes going on now, how much are we losing? I haven't seen one way to pull that easily. But if you're in the budget, at least you can say, okay, here's how much of their budget might be from those different funding sources. So if you're interested now, I would say go look on our YouTube page or send Par an email and we can send you the link to that. Or stay tuned, follow us on social media. And when we schedule our next budget workshop, you can have that. And we also create a budget handout. It's on I'll go ahead and share my computer again. On our website, that's just just a budget kind of breakdown, a quick view sheet of, what are those codes? Because inevitably they're not going to use the same code we're used to when they're talking about the departments, or like the funding sources. What's an A fund versus what's a P fund? I don't know if there's a P fund. So let's see. Trying to remind myself where we keep it. This is the PAR website. This current legislature page, if you're not familiar with it, is very handy. For example, we've got the room, phone, fax directory for the offices. We also have an office managers list. So if you are trying to schedule a meeting with a legislator office, I will say that it changes frequently. So this was last updated at the end of August. The nice thing is if you call the legislator's office and somebody has left, they will tell you if somebody new is there. And so you can pay attention to that. We've also got the session calendar that I showed you screenshots of before. And let's see.
The office manager list is gold, actually, and it's not on the legislative website. So
It is not.
Yes. So just letting everyone know, that's a good one.
Let me see if I can find this handout quickly.
And Andy, you don't have to go into too much detail. I think I was just curious about, what happens differently during the non-budget year versus the budget years. Are there any things that we should be aware of that will happen a little bit differently with this biennium process that the legislature uses?
That's a great question. So at the beginning of the 2-year cycle, they are submitting a full budget. In the second year, they can make changes to that. And it could be that this year there could be extra changes because we're all waiting to see how federal funding changes. So it'll be a supplementary budget. And again, we're happy to walk you through that, and definitely pay attention because we'll talk a little bit more about that as it gets closer to the budget bill being discussed. But we do have the workshop scheduled, and I am, of course, not going to be able to find this budget worksheet.
That's
when you're
okay.
up for
Yeah,
it, but it is there.
I think it was really important, Andy, that you directed us to this part, that there are facets to your website that we weren't aware of, and we could do the deep dive down the rabbit holes on our own.
Yeah.
But thanks for pointing it out to us. That was news to me as well, so thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions from the group? We have about just 4 minutes. And, of course, where to find Andy, so don't worry if you don't hit your questions today. But yeah, anybody else want to go ahead, Angel? Thank you.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for being here. That was super informative. I missed the beginning, so I apologize if anything here is redundant, but I just wanted to make sure that I understood the process because I had a couple questions come up as you were talking us through it. So let's make up a bill. My bill is I want to see art education in all public schools. So that's my bill. So then I need to determine how much money that's going to cost and look in the budget and make sure that there's money floating around there for that.
Not necessarily, because if there are 3,000 bills introduced and only 300 make it through, all of those bills are going to be asking for much more money than we have. So I think having an idea of how much it will cost is critical.
Yep.
And then as part of the bill, as part of the process, the money committees are trying to figure out, is there enough money for it? And what is the support from the legislators?
Okay. And so then at that point, I would talk to the committee chair, get their buy-in. Is that correct?
Or at least find a legislator to introduce the bill on your behalf.
Okay.
If it's the committee chair, great. But if it's not, you need to have it introduced as the starting point.
Okay. And then there's 2 places where the bills don't get heard. Why would a bill not get heard? They're doing that on purpose, right? They don't think the bill is valid, worthwhile, whatever. How do you make sure that that doesn't happen, and why does that happen?
So I think maybe I'd change it a little bit more, that it may not be about that bill. It may be it may be about that bill, but it's not always. It could just be there are other bills that are getting more attention. And so not only advocating it as an individual to say, committee chair, please schedule this bill for hearing, but trying to get other people to contact them as well so that they can see numbers, that they can see there is a need for this. It's not just one person. And again, trying to do that over and over and over again. So the first time it's referred to a committee, the second time it's referred, you really need to keep pushing that forward. And then if you are advocating with groups, thinking, sharing with the group, sometimes it's hard for people to come up with, what do I want to say about this? So similar to how I had a sample document that you could leave with legislators, you could create a sample document that you share with your advocates about, here are points we want to highlight, or we want to highlight consistently. Feel free to offer your own story as well. But if we're trying to, really hammer in some talking points, that can be useful, especially because sometimes often you only get 48 hours notice, and they're asking you to provide your testimony 24 hours in advance. So we'll tell people, there's nothing to stop you from drafting your testimony in advance, and having it saved on your computer. So when that hearing notice comes out, you're not sitting there racking your brain, or they've got other conflicts happening at the same time. You're ready to go, and you can share that. And the speaker mentioned looking at testimony, and I didn't, I was trying to go by the 45 minutes. So one thing I like to look at is the testimony files. So this is the budget bill because it's the number I always remember. Going in and looking at the testimony and seeing what other people have talked about in the past, if it's last year, if it's the last hearing, and just really seeing what's in there can be useful. It also gives good ideas about how to formulate your testimony. That was the governor's office. Then we've got also the governor's office, it looks like. So, some of the departments will have different kinds of testimony than maybe individuals will have. But again, we're using the same kind of things, of bullet points, things that are easy to skim, putting our position at the top, but this will help familiarize people with those issues. So I really like looking at testimony files. I think they're super interesting, and they give that perspective. And it also could prepare you to what you want to talk about that somebody's going to bring up against your idea, right?
So Angel, that question, I think Andy's brought up a really good point about testimony. And if sometimes, your question around why a bill might not make it past, get it even heard by the first first committee. And sometimes there are ideological differences or opinions about the impact of the bill. And so that's why it's really important to meet with the subject matter committee to just understand where they're coming from, especially if it's a controversial topic. You want to understand that. And then, like Andy said, looking at testimony from the past around similar topic bills would give you a sense. You almost want to map out opposition and support to understand why, right? Who's positioned where, and how would that position you as you kind of make your way in this process, right? Again, like just general positionality that will inform your strategy and who you actually should be meeting with, both supporters and potential opponents in the legislature. So just kind of covering all your bases. That homework on the front end before you even introduce the bill is really critical, of socializing the concept with people. So we've unfortunately run out of time. We're at 1:17. This topic reminds us that we could talk about it forever. Andy, we know it sounds like she's got all these tools in her bag of tools, and we're sorry to have to cut it off. But in the interest of time, maybe Andy, if you're open, we can have you back in the future for like part 2 of the deeper issues and strategies around this process. But for now, we're going to thank you for taking the time with us. And again, for the wealth of information, we've put a lot of the links in the chat for you to follow up with: LRB, the public access room, the state capitol website, and some links to like the sunshine laws and what you can and cannot do, just to kind of get you set up. So thank you, everyone. Gay, do you have some final comments and thoughts to close us out?
So thank you, Lisa. Just a big mahalo to you, to Andy, to the speaker for joining today. Thank you to all of you for being here and engaging with us in this conversation. Do join us next week, same time, same Zoom link. We'll be talking about storytelling and the narrative and how impactful sharing personal stories can be. And we've got some great guests coming. Pop Creative Media will join us. Cassie Ordonio with Hawaii Public Radio, and Mina Ellison with Donkey Mill Arts Center as well. So thank you again, and we look forward to having you all with us next Tuesday.
Thank you. And the slides, someone's asking if the slides are available. Andy, are you able to provide that?
Yep, I'll send you a PDF of them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. Aloha.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha.